Emmerdale's Robert Sugden uncovers the secret threat to his happiness with Erin Dingle tonight, and immediately fears that history could be repeating itself. With Kev Townsend back in the village and plotting his revenge, are Robert and Erin about to face a miserable time over the festive season? The ITV soap has just kicked off a huge Christmas storyline for the popular couple, as Erin was furious to discover that someone had deliberately damaged his car. This unsettling incident came shortly after Robert loved him for that steadiness. He loved Erin for being himself, blunt, stubborn, surprisingly tender under all the thorny layers. The peace felt impossible to hold. The first sign was petty. A scrape along the rear bumper of Erin's car, heavy enough to mean intent, but not enough to be anything like terror. Erin had come home furious, face flushed, breath puffing clouds. "It's vandalism," he'd said. "Someone's taking a pot shot." Robert had tried to stay sensible. Ross Barton had been cross with them in the pub over the Seb situation. Ross was loud, reckless, and had a mouth like a fuse. It was easy to point a finger at him. It was also lazy, and Robert hated being lazy when Erin was scared. Then came the trees. Someone had set small fires, bright and stupid, against the line of saplings outside Erin's flat. The flames had been doused quickly, neighbors with buckets, a brave hand from the cafe owner, but the message had arrived. Do not feel safe. Erin's first instinct, predictably, was to blame Ross. "He's a hothead, Rob. He likes making people sweat," Erin said, scanning the street with the mixture of defiance and worry that Robert adored. He had the look of someone who wanted to call up every tough bloke he knew and demand justice. Robert, though, had seen shadows in a different shape. He had seen a silhouette the night before, at the edge of the lane, a frame he recognized because it had haunted the worst years of his life. Kev Townsend. Kev's return to the village was a rusted key in an old wound. He'd been Robert's prison husband once, a man whose affection had been poisonous and whose violence had left scars Robert had tried to hide behind jokes and nerves. Kev knew the machinery of Robert's past, the guilt, the soft points, the names that could be levered to rupture him all over again. Robert had promised himself, more than once, that he would never go back to that metabolism of fear. But Kev's presence made the promise feel naive. Robert spotted him that morning because he couldn't not. Kev had been leaning against the brick of the florist's, hands shoved into a thick jacket, his profile cut by the low sun. He looked smaller than Robert remembered, but there was a wire to him, an alertness that said he was ready to pounce. Robert's stomach dropped like a stone in a well. He watched Kev lift his head and look the other way, then slip from sight. It was a dare or a confession, Robert couldn't decide which. When he told Erin, the other man said the sensible things. Call the police, get the car forensically checked. But Erin also said the tenderest thing. Come to bed with me, Rob. Let's not let them win. Robert accepted the tenderness. He accepted Erin, and he accepted, quietly, that accepting Erin might make him a target. The next encounter was too bold to be coincidence. Robert saw Kev again, this time at dusk. The village had drawn inside. Curtains were a constellation of warm squares. Robert had been on the bus, stomach tight with a dread that felt like adrenaline, when the bus creaked to a stop near the lane and Kev just stood there, as if waiting to be noticed. Robert got off. The air smelled of diesel and damp leaves. His heart was a loud, traitorous thing. "Kev," he called before he could talk himself into silence. Kev turned. For a second, it felt like the world held its breath. The man looked older, with a beard bristling into gray, but his eyes still had that quiet, dangerous focus. He did not smile. "This is my street, Robert," Kev said without prelude. "This is where I live now. I don't want trouble." Robert felt the muscle of his face flex into something hardened. "You walked past last night. You know who Erin is?" Kev's mouth was a slit. "I don't know everything," he said. He folded his arms. "People change. People lie." "Don't," Robert said. The word was as small and brittle as an icicle. "Don't make this about him. Don't make him the thing you hurt." Kev's hand drifted to his pocket. For a flash of a heartbeat, Robert imagined a knife or a memory of a sword. The ridiculous, violent props that haunted Kev's hands in the worst of their shared history. But Kev only withdrew a cigarette and lit it with an absent flick. Smoke wreaths formed a halo that snarled into the cold. "I'm sorry about the car," Kev said after a pause. It wasn't meant to go any further than that. Robert's mind pelted back to relevance. The scrape, the trees, small jabs in the ribs. "Why?" Robert asked. "Why start this at all?" Kev blew smoke up into the air. "Because some things don't sit right. Because you took my part of your life, and you made it someone else's." Because I can't watch you be happy while I. He stopped. The sentence hung like a broken wire. While you what? Robert demanded. He folded his hands into fists to stop them trembling. While you think you can force us apart. The cigarette burned down. Kev's voice was soft, like surprised sorrow. I don't accept it, Robert. I can't accept him. I tried to be all right about it, but it eats me. So I look for ways, little ways, to remind you of the choices you made. Robert felt anger like heat. You think this makes me choose you? It only makes me see you as the danger you are. Kev's face shifted. For a fraction of a moment, the man who had once been brutal softened into something pleading. I loved you in my way. I thought. Love doesn't buy terror. Robert cut him off. Love doesn't set fire to trees. Love doesn't scratch a car. Kev shrugged like a man closing the lid on thoughts he didn't want to own. Not all ways are love. Robert walked away then, the word coward, like a voice in his head. He felt hollowed out, like someone had picked at the seam of his piece and found the cotton batting inside. He returned home to find Aaron setting out tinsel on the hearth, humming off-key to a carol on the radio. Aaron looked up and smiled, and for a second the world recalibrated. Did you see him? Aaron asked. Robert knelt and kissed him. Yes. Well. Aaron's brow kinked with worry. He's been around, Robert said truthfully. But he says he won't go further. Aaron gave a laugh that wasn't happy. That's Kev for you. Says nothing and does everything. They tried to play normal after that. They baked mince pies that tasted of nostalgia and spice, and they wrapped small presents with clumsy love. Robert watched the way Aaron folded ribbon with the same care he once used to fold himself into someone safe. The village swelled with holiday lights and families ate together. Robert found himself counting the days until Christmas with a small, unbelieving hope. He had perhaps naively pinned his faith to routine, to the idea that Kev, like everyone, would be softened by the season. On Christmas Eve, the House of Dingle warmth was on display for everyone. The pub's chatter ran like warm tea over the place, and Ross tried, with a grin, to act like a peacemaker. Right, lads? This has gone far enough, Ross declared, swatting his hands like a man trying to crush a wasp. Whoever's doing this is wasting their time. Robert wanted to agree, wanted to enjoy the last hours of peace, but the voice of suspicion in him had become a resident. He drifted outside for air, and the street had the sleepy look of a town readying itself for sleep. The lane was empty, but at the far end, a figure moved like a shadow flung by lamplight. Robert's throat closed. He followed. He found Kev at the corner near the canal, staring at the water. Robert approached carefully. The silence between them was a thin pain. You promised, Robert said. You said you'd stop. Kev shrugged. I promised a lot of things. Why are you here? Robert forced the words out. I came to tell you I can't do this, Kev admitted in that low, haunted voice. I can't accept it. I thought maybe if I said it I'd be free. But I isn't. Robert's chest was tight with the panic of memory. The pushing and the hitting, the gaslight, the moments he'd signed away because he'd been too young to know better. He remembered hiding bruises behind long-sleeved shirts, and whispers at night that had never been forgiven. Get away from me, Robert said. It wasn't a fresh order. It was the echo of years. For a heartbeat, Kev looked as if he might step forward. Then he made no move. He did the opposite. He backed away into the dark. I don't want to hurt him, he said. I just don't want to watch you with him. Robert held on to the truth like a warm coal. But hurting him is what you'll do if you follow through. Kev's reply was muffled. Maybe I like the hurting more than I admit. That night, Robert had the strangest dream. Kev at the foot of their bed, whispering confessions into the mattress, while Aaron slept with the innocence of someone who had never known the old darkness. Robert woke with sweat cold on his back and an ache in his mouth from screaming. He lay there and listened to Aaron breathe and felt gratitude turned sharp. Christmas Day began like a hymn. Aaron made pancakes, the flat filled with the smell of syrup and batter. Ross delivered an awkward present and a promise to behave. Seb texted a clumsy plea for a meeting later in the afternoon. Robert laughed at the noise of it all, at the domesticity that felt like a fragile vessel. For a few hours he forgot to be afraid. Then Robert wasn't there. The panic started as an absence, a missing chair. Aaron called, first lightly, then with an undercurrent of annoyance when Robert didn't pick up. He assumed Robert had popped round to see Ross, or to check on a cousin. 2 missed calls became frantic messages. Aaron left the flat and walked the route Robert favored. The canal, the lane, the coffee shop. Bottles of gin sat beside closed doors, and the village felt suddenly very large and empty. Ross showed up, his face slack in worry, and the mood turned. He wouldn't just go, Ross said. Not today. Aaron's fear became a shape that cut through all the pleasant edges of the day. He called the police. He called friends. He called Seb. The questions were small missiles. When a search turned up scorch marks along the canal path and clothing snagged on the rail, reality snapped. It wasn't just that Robert was missing. It was that someone had been here, very recently, and the tracks suggested a struggle. The next hours moved with a disorienting speed. Police tape, flashlights, neighbors with faces suddenly lined by concern. Aaron sat on a curb, hands in his hair, as a uniformed officer asked him about enemies, about Robert's state of mind. Aaron's answers blurred into the cold. He thought of Kev. He thought of Ross. He thought of the shadow of every man who'd ever loomed in Robert's life. When the officers showed him the CCTV, grainy footage from the corner near the florist, the world went chromium. A hooded figure was seen on the path at the time Robert was last seen. The figure paused as if waiting, then hurried away. Another silhouette moved towards the canal and disappeared into the frame. The timestamp flickered, 2:18 p.m. It was precise and barbed. Aaron's hands were steady in terror. That was Robert, he said. That was him. And that one there looks like Kev. Are you sure? An officer asked. Aaron felt foolish when he said, yes. But he had known Kev since the first time he'd met Robert's past. The cane of familiarity had a handle. A search party formed. Men and women from the village threw themselves into the mud, the cold seeping through boots and into marrow. Ross acted like a man possessed, cursing himself for every jab he'd ever made. Seb came with eyes like a boy who had just noticed the world had knives. Kev, when he was found, was not where anyone wanted to see him. He'd been at the canal bridge, hands in the pocket of his jacket, looking as if he might faint. He didn't resist when the police cuffed him for questioning. His face was pale, and he blamed the drink and the bleakness. He denied involvement at first, then said things that made the room small. Confessions that bobbed and turned, like plastic toys in a puddle. I didn't do it, he'd said. I scratched the car. I said things. But I didn't take him. Robert's scarf was found under a bench, damp and smelling faintly of smoke. The village's stomach dropped. Aaron could feel his heart beating a tattoo against his ribs. He rehearsed losses and bargains in his head. He kept asking himself over and over why Robert would vanish. The truth, when it came, had the bluntness of winter air. A fisherman found footprints at the canal bend, a trail that led to a ditch where the water pooled dark and cold. They called it the worst news before the worst news could arrive. When the police drew back the covering and found signs that Robert had been taken, a scarf wrapped around a rail, a small personal item left as a message, everyone in the village felt the world lean. Aaron was at the front when a body was discovered, but it wasn't Robert. It was a mannequin of dread, a jacket slung over a bush, a hat placed on the ground in a mockery that could have been heroic in stagecraft. The real Robert was still missing. Hope and fear had become braided, impossible to unknot. Kev's interrogation became the center of the storm. He denied violent involvement. He described being at the canal, but insisted he'd left Robert alive. I saw him talking to someone, he said. Then he was gone. His eyes darted like trapped birds. He sobbed, sometimes in a way that looked like grief, and sometimes like acting. The village turned into a map of accusations. Fingers pointed like compasses, and Robert's name became both flag and absence. People whispered about past transgressions, about debts unpaid and grudges kept. Ross wanted to punch anything that fit the shape of an enemy. Aaron wanted to turn himself inside out until the answer spilled plain. On Boxing Day, a twist arrived that felt like a cold blade. CCTV from a pub the night before showed a scuffle near the pool table. A man with Kev's stature had been seen arguing with someone hooded. A witness said they'd heard Kev's name shouted. But that witness's memory wavered, colored by the fear that made everyone more certain than they knew how to be. Days stretched. The search grew wider. Robert's solicitor called with questions. People lit candles outside their windows. Aaron slept in fits and starts on Robert's armchair, clutching at things that smelled like him. Then, almost as if the season itself had a will beyond all their franticness, Robert reappeared. He wasn't whole. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Emmerdale Echoes.